So if you want to bail out now, you can do so. So I welcome everybody to our discussion of discussions, where for 60 minutes, Curry Mitchell will describe his discussion strategies. Take it away, Curry.
I'm going to recite from the Yale version of Stanford's.
I was one of the thoughts I had as I've been looking at a lot of different stuff. All these engagement books have sections on discussions now, and all online teaching books have sessions on discussions now. It is all over the place, wouldn't you say?
Sure. Yep. Yeah.
So I guess that's a hopeful sign, and that everybody's trying to move towards discussion. But one of the things that I thought might be a starting point is it seems to me that one of the goals of discussion is all in. Like no matter what someone's approach is, they're trying to get as many people in the room to actually speak and interact with the material. Thoughts on that?
I noticed that too. And it actually made me question some of it. That whole approach. It's just like, well, don't we have learners who really learn just fine without speaking aloud in the room?
Right.
And I know that's a tougher thing online because we can't see anything going on, but in a classroom, we can see things going on even when somebody's not speaking.
Yeah.
So I was a little bit, I saw that and I just kept coming up over and over, and I thought, okay, well, let's keep this. This is not a fact. This is not necessarily a given that one wants an entire room full of 40 people all actively participating. There is some value to having those leaders, those dominators in there. I mean, some people really do learn quite well from listening. I think we've somehow degraded that in our conversations about learning.
Sure.
And there's
case in point, I was hoping to just show up and listen tonight. I didn't. Or who?
Nice try, buddy. Everybody's in. Everybody's in. Well, that brings up the interesting issue with Zoom. And by the way, I see that Matt Bartons has joined us, or Burtons, I'm sorry. Hi, Matt. We can't see you, but maybe you can hear us? Well, we won't make Matt participate.
So he's saying hi in the chat.
Okay, he is.
Yeah, I'll watch the chat.
Okay, great. So now I lost my thread because I was saying hi to Matt.
Oh, that's okay. Go Dodgers.
But
oh, sorry.
So, but I was thinking of the online space, what we're in now, Zoom. And I really do try to get everybody at some point to say something, to get their voice in the conversation. But then I always leave space in conversations for them not to do that too. So it's kind of, I'm trying to balance it. So I tend to kind of start off with something where everybody says hi and just shares a thought on an open topic. So just anything they want to share. And then after that, I don't make everyone comment on everything. And that seems to be a balance that's working for me. But I guess, it does put some pressure on people who would maybe not otherwise want to speak, right?
Yeah. And I like that. But I like that balance because I found even in my own classroom, the on-site classroom, it's if I go out of my way to invite somebody, just set them up, like tee them up for something that they can even just say yes to, right? And but it gets their voice. They're more likely to volunteer something later that they otherwise might not, right? So there's definitely value in sort of, calling on students and making them participate, but making sure that it's within their sort of their abilities, their comfort zone to be successful, right? In that video. But I've stolen this tactic for synchronous discussions online from you, Jim. Yeah. And so when we start, I have everybody everybody has to say something for 30 seconds, and this is your strategy. Yeah. And what I did last time was I told them an article we were going to read, and I told them we're all going to say something about it, so they all knew that was going to happen.
That's great.
And when we all logged in, I had assigned them each a category. So like, you folks are going to talk about this thing, you folks are going to talk about that thing, you folks are going to talk about this. And I kind of tried, the first people were the ones that I felt in the discussions up to that point had been strongest. So I knew that they'd be comfortable, or I hoped they would be.
Yeah.
But I offered everyone else, I said, before we get done with the topic, if you would rather comment on that topic than the one I've assigned you, go ahead and jump in, right? So they had an option to think for a while, right? And if they, while that was happening, came up with an idea, they could jump in right then, say it with confidence, and then they could get out of whatever it is I had assigned them to do. And I think that worked pretty well.
Yeah, that sounds cool.
Yeah, and one of the things I've enjoyed this semester, especially, although I started it last semester, was having the students come in with something prepared, kind of like your Curry's having them think about something, and you're going to talk about a particular thing. And I like to have them. I changed the homework assignments so that it had something that they looked up on their own that they could share, so it would automatically be different for everybody.
Nice.
They know when they come in the room, they're going to share that.
Yeah.
And then what happens after that? So I've noticed that when they do have something to share right away, even if it's just very short and we go around the room, they're much more likely to speak later.
And that connects to your commitment to curating, right? I mean, because in a sense, that's a form of curation, right?
It is a form of curation, but it's also more discovery. For what my goals are,
Yeah.
is for them to read the chapter and get curious about just one thing.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, that is cool.
But it's
So they bring it in. So I have no idea what it's going to be. I don't know
Yeah.
what they're going to talk about, because they can pick out any, as long as they've got some weird tenuous connection to the chapter reading, doesn't matter what it is.
Yeah.
Then they go look it up or find out, and then they bring it to us.
I like that. It seems one of the common motifs we're hearing from you and Curry is this idea of openness, this idea of options, and how that can give people more places to join the conversation. The more narrow the discussion, the less likely it is, right, to get more voices to open up. Does that sound like a common thread?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and I think even a looseness, like Lisa's pointing out. I mean,
I don't know what's going to happen.
Exactly. And as long as it's threaded to that article, I feel sometimes I don't feel comfortable with where we are in the discussion, but I trust that thread. I trust that I can constantly pull on that thread, and I can get us to, an outcome that I have set for that day, or somewhere I know they need to be successful in this next assignment, right?
Yeah.
But I can let them sort of be loose and kind of, if we need to be in that space and talk about that thing, whatever it is, for a little while, we can do that. And then try to pull on it and get back to whatever it is we're trying to do that day.
Well, maybe you two can speak to a problem I have with what I'm doing, because although they each bring in something and they speak, and although they're happy to deal with larger issues and talk about them to me, they don't talk a whole lot to each other. And I'm wondering if you value that, and if you do something that encourages that.
Are you talking online versus class?
No, I'm talking in the room.
Okay.
I'm just in a classroom. I'll notice they're happy to talk to me. And I used to seat them round in a circle.
Yeah.
I had the space for it. Some classes I do, some I don't. But that seemed to make them edgy to be facing each other. And yet when they're all facing me, they tend to answer to me. And I'm just wondering if it's valuable to get them to talk to each other, which I think it is.
Right.
How can I engender that a little bit more?
Curry is a master at that, actually. Yes, you are, Curry. Can you talk about how you get them to brainstorm together for so many of your writing activities? I walk in Curry's classroom, Lisa, and the write boards are covered with stuff the students have put up there that has sprung from their discussion with each other, right, Curry?
Yeah. But I mean, it starts with everything you're describing, Lisa. I mean, and it's, early in the semester, there's this culture of we just investigate. We just ask questions. We just say whatever's on our mind. Like, there's never a moment where I say, no, let's not, right? It's just whatever's said, cliche, colloquial, it goes on the board, right? And that's, we got to start that way. So that's just the ethos of the classroom. But I'll also I really struggle actually with just me talking and the whole class looking at me, right? I mean, the kind of right? This sort of silence. I'm totally comfortable with awkward silence. I'm fine with that. But I can tell they're not, like, we're not there yet. Like, we didn't. And so what I'll often do is, like, 30 seconds just debate with each other the thing I just said. And it totally energizes the room, right? And it gets them just talking. Even if they're just talking about the weekend, I don't care. It adds energy. But most of them are talking about what we just were talking about. And then from there, I can kind of overhear and like call on people. You know, Susan and David, you were just talking about something super interesting. Could you just share, right? And kind of, that's every week as we kind of just build that culture. And so, I don't know. I mean, maybe we get to a place week 6, week 7, where I say, okay, chat with each other, 5 in a group, see what you come up with, put it on the board. Maybe that builds up to that point. But also, I don't know. I think it's just what you say, what you like your starting point. It's bring something tangential. I don't care what it is. And we're just going to pull on that thread and investigate it. And you're just valuing that, I think that's the starting point, right? That's how you build knowledge. It's just where I'm at and where I can get with it, right?
What I'm hearing from you, I'm sorry, Lisa, were you gonna? Okay,
no, I want to hear how you do it too.
What I'm hearing from Curry that interests me, and it connects with the reading. As usual, I'm juggling like 4 different books and 10 different websites, and so I can't remember. But another theme in all the reading is there is a value early on in the semester in engagement for engagement's sake. That just creating a culture where people feel comfortable talking. You know, and there's an openness, and then you scaffold that up. And that's is exactly what I hear Curry describing. So, you know, by week 5, 6, you're probably in a mode where your discussions can be more productive, but that you've got to kind of invest that energy and time in more open stuff and more free stuff. But I also heard Curry say something I find really interesting, which is respond. I'm gonna put something up. I'm gonna say something, and I want you to respond. You know, like just an exercise in response to everybody's gonna do that, and we could do it all together, or we could do it in groups of 3, or we can do it in other kind of formations. But the idea of kind of a required, like a prompt, like you're doing little prompts that shorter prompts that they have to respond to. I'll throw out one more idea on the theory side of this. I've noticed a surprising number of people who write about discussion, writing about, oh my gosh, I'm forgetting, where are we getting all our action verbs from for slows now? What is it called?
I don't know. I try really hard not to remember stuff like that.
Is it Piaget? Who?
Not originally.
Bloom's taxonomy.
Bloom.
How many of the books that are talking about discussion at some point look at Bloom's taxonomy, and the new one and the old one, and talk about how to sequence discussion what activities to what you want to achieve on that sequence of thinking. And I think that's kind of actually a cool idea, right? What kind of thinking am I looking for them? It's probably not wise to put the evaluation discussion in week 1, right? Week 1, right? I want to start at a lower level, a confidence building level. On the other hand, every time we ask them for their opinion about anything, they are actually evaluating, right? And so I can sneak in evaluation as opinion and then help them understand, you just evaluate, you know, and now you can write an analytical paragraph or whatever. So listening to Curry, I was just thinking of that idea of kind of scaffolding and also just early on engagement for its own sake. Thoughts?
Yeah, the scaffolding idea has always frightened me a little bit. Because, no, I think
a little too brave for the world.
It all just seems very hard. I mean, I was a lecturer for a long time.
Right.
You just get up there and you lecture,
right.
And you get really expert at telling whether they get what you're saying or not. And you adapt your lecture as you talk, because we have the luxury of the smaller classroom rather than the big theater. So as a result, you know, that lecture, I've had many students say, oh, that was great. That was exactly, you know, what I needed, having not said a word the entire time. But I feel lonely up there. And I'm never sure, you know, can somebody participate with me? And So the idea of scaffolding discussion for somebody who lectures so much was always very frightening for me. I felt like there was a whole new set of skills I needed to learn to be able to do that. So for me, it's really nice to hear you say things like, just get them talking for the sake of talking first, so that you set up this environment where they're comfortable talking. And when that happens in a classroom, my lectures start to shift into lecture discussion anyway.
Yeah.
Because they feel comfortable enough to go, excuse me, wait a minute, what you just said, I'm not sure about that at all.
Yeah.
And when they're able to do that, then the lecture turns into completely something else instead of this, kind of speaking to the frozen fish thing, which I hate doing.
Right. Well,
so I like that idea.
My mindset is always, I can direct energy. If there is energy, I can move that energy. Like, we can purpose that energy towards something. But if there's no energy, that's where I'm in trouble. It's like, I don't know what to do now, right? If it's like you said. But I wanted to ask you, Lisa, did you feel like moving from lecturing on site to now teaching online, did that help with the thinking about more participatory engagement? Because the online student has to grab on and push play and kind of respond, and right?
What's interesting is the two feed off each other, because I do both every semester. I'm never fully online. I'm never fully on site. So the two really feed each other. Sometimes something will just work in the room that is so cool, I want to figure out how to do it in an online environment. And other times there'll be something so cool online, like students posting things and sharing them online was what led me to think about them doing it in class and putting everything they post up on the screen and having them talk about their work. That whole idea that I do now in the classroom, and the students love it, came out of me doing it online. So the two completely feed each other. I love working in both methods just for that. For everything, not just discussion.
Yeah. That's awesome.
One of the things that teaching online has helped me with is the value that there can be a very deep value in asynchronous discussion. That there can be a real richness about it if it plays out right. If you come up with the right set of questions, and I've really been kind of enjoying lately trying to stimulate better asynchronous discussions. And I've been focused on thinking when I design my questions for asynchronous discussion, of course I've got a what, right? There are whats that I want them to talk about. But lately I've been also thinking about how I want them to think. And so as I balance what with how, that's actually opened up question possibilities. And I've let go of the what a little bit and thrown in questions that are more how questions that that they can spring from the what. And so now typically in my asynchronous discussion, I'll say, pick one of these 4 options and discuss it. And one of the options might be, come up with something of your own that's better than my options. If I think they're in a place where they can, right, I'm going to design my own prompt, damn it, Jim. And I've just been having a much better time with it. And sometimes I'm nervous, like, I did a prompt in American Studies where I asked a question that they could answer without actually having referred to any of the art that I wanted them looking at. But it sprung from the art. It sprung from the video lectures and the notes, but they could go off on a tangent. And I asked myself why I wanted that question in there so much, because I knew, one, that most of them would answer that question because it was the coolest question. And 2, it meant that a lot of them wouldn't actually show me they could analyze a particular work of art. And I realized I wanted it there because that was the one question where they would actually take what they're learning in this class and apply it to the real world. Like the thinking that I really want them to do ultimately, So I had to sort of let go of my objective for the lesson, right? And think about this larger life idea. And I remember what it is. I'll share it really quickly and then I'll shut up. A lot of art critics have studied the landscape art in the 19th century America and argue that Americans made this link between God, nature, and nation. And the idea was we would celebrate the extraordinary American landscape because it showed that God was on our side, right? That God loved our country, and that there was this weird connection, right? To the more beautiful the landscape, the more God was with us. And I sort of, the question I throw out to the students is, what do you think of that idea? What do you think of the idea that God is in nature and the beauty of nature is an endorsement of the American nation? You know, does that seem like that was a good thing? Is that where we are today? And of course they all went off on that. But what was remarkable about it is they did exactly what I thought they'd do. They didn't really analyze any paintings, but they never could have participated in that conversation if they hadn't read all the stuff.
Right.
Like they had to have been informed by all the stuff to make their argument. And then they made all sorts of really interesting arguments. And it was a question I agonized over whether I wanted to include. Anyway.
But are you saying your goal then really became, as you worked through this, your goal became the application? I mean, that what you wanted out of the discussion was not just chit chat, and it wasn't just talking about paintings. What ultimately you ended up wanting out of the discussion was the application of a particular way of thinking.
Or the ability to question a way of thinking, right? Like I realized what I wanted them to do was to be able to question 19th century ideology and look for how it might still be in play today, right? Or not be in play today. Just sort of question the ideology. And I don't think I realized that was my agenda until I saw the question. Like it was very inductive. It was just the process of trying to write a cool question that brought me to that idea.
Yeah.
Hey, Matt, thank you for telling us you're out there.
Yeah.
I'm sorry you can't interact, but it's awesome that you're here. And
he just interacted.
And if you want to share, you can always send something on the chat to us.
Yeah, that's true.
All right, Curry, go for it. You were going to say something.
No, I just was going to say, that makes me think that so often when I'm building a discussion question, having listened to you just talk through what you've done, it makes me realize that sometimes I'm when I'm crafting that discussion prompt, I'm thinking about the thing I want to grade at the end, right? And I'm kind of setting myself up so that when I'm grading it, I know I'll have these salient features that I can tick. That was there, that wasn't there, and then they can get the score, right? And sometimes I can do that in a way that engenders interesting thinking and discussion. But sometimes it creates this sort of, students know what they're getting into. I have to perform. I have to say the things that the teacher wants me to say. And the discussion kind of feels flat. But by loosening up the object upon which they sort of apply that thinking, right? Like what you just said, they have to bring the ideas and the reading with them, but they're so much more comfortable and probably interested to even themselves to see how that idea would play upon that thing they're looking at.
It's funny because I've had sort of an opposite thing happen in my discussion. I've got a class I hadn't taught online before, and I don't use discussion online, really. I have a posting board with the primary sources, and they can comment, but they're sharing their work rather than talking to each other. Because I used to do discussion, I gave it up for a long time. But this class, I really wanted to do it because, and Curry will relate to this, I didn't want to write quizzes. I really didn't want to write any quizzes. So I've get through this whole book, and I've worked really hard on this class, and I've got all these resources. And so what I did was I took video clips off the Films for the Humanities, and I put it at the top of the discussion, and it would be some sort of 2-minute thing that I could turn into a controversy or something. And so then the idea was to kind of, as they responded to it, that object, let them get all their, oh, I'd be on this side, oh, I'd be on that side. Then after they've done that for a few days, I come in and say, okay, now you've all got to respond to this. So I don't actually have any questions to start the discussion. It's
That's
just
awesome.
Here's kind of some opposing views, which is everybody thinks simplistic at the beginning anyway. And I come in on midweek Thursday, and I post the Take Discussion from Here post. And there I summarize a little bit about what they've said, but I also pick out things from their posts that make those larger questions and those kind of that application of the understanding, and try to bring it into the now. The discussion's been phenomenal. It's just been great. And they've been answering each other, and I'll tell them to answer each other. I'll say, Alana said this thing and this thing, do you think that's right? And I never use the word discuss, ever. I never say discuss this. say, you know,
That's cool.
counter what she posted or,
Yeah.
but what's funny about it is I keep trying to get them to apply history to now, because there's so much stuff in American history that applies to now, and they want to stay in the past. When I had them writing about Reconstruction, it's like,
That's cool.
they're pulling down statues and stuff back east.
Yeah.
The students want to talk about how Reconstruction affected people right then. And it's
That's
like,
awesome.
so funny, I can't pull it forward.
Yeah. But that's great. They want to dig in deeper.
Right. They want to go deeper into that and argue that. And it's like, well, you know, who am I to say what I thought my goal for discussion was?
Right. Well, the facilitator in me wants to describe what you just said as the non-discussion discussion.
I know.
I've had brilliant discussions by never using the D word.
I never used the D word because that always used to scare me. It's like they used to have these things. I mean, essay questions. It was essay questions where they'd say, you know, why did Rome fall? Discuss. Yeah, discuss. It's like, what? You know, if there's one thing that can make me completely tongue-tied, it's discuss.
Right.
Yeah. I'll use any other word.
Yeah. But that makes me so, when I taught basic skills courses, I used to design my essay prompts in a way that when you first read the question, you thought you knew how to answer it right away, like just off the top of your head. But then when you read something or I asked a question, you suddenly realized that there was a little more to it. And all I would do in those classes was we would just talk about that discussion, like that question, like the question we're writing an essay about and we're reading about is just the theme of every class until we get up to the end of that essay. And so the first day we'd look at the question, everybody's like, oh, done, can write it tonight. And then by the time we get to week 3, they're like, I don't know. Who can answer this question? Nobody can answer this question, right? And it made it fun, right? It made it like, now we have to take a position. Now you've got to bring something. Right. And it made those discussions great because I would ask, like you just said, like I would just raise something or just push something a little bit. And all I needed was a nudge for someone else to say, oh, I can see where that's going to lead us. And they would follow it for a bit. And it was just, you know, that kind of Socratic, you know, I don't even know where we're going to end up. We're going to end up in essays. I don't know what's going to be in those essays, right? But that's the point, right? We're just going to follow this and think and read until we get to a place where we can stand with confidence on some kind of position. Or ask a question that we think is just really fascinating and then follow it, you know?
Yeah, what you're doing sounds to me, because one of the things I was thinking about when I was reading the stuff that Jim set out earlier today, and I was looking through it, is it seems to be about alignment. A lot of it seems to be about alignment. It's like, you know that there's this end product of this essay that you want. So you've wrapped this whole unit around that, and then the discussion is part of processing the information to get to a particular point. And I think one of the reasons I'm so happy with what's happening in this one American history class is because those issues that I raise and the way that I just guide discussion after that is totally tied into all their other readings and all the other stuff they've been doing. Yeah. And I think before, when I was doing it and I was so unhappy with discussion, my goal was just engagement. Let's just discuss. Let's just talk. And it didn't always align with the materials we were working on, with the topic we were working on, with the things that were really the themes for that week. It didn't always align, and I get very frustrated with it. And so if we're always thinking about, discussion's just one way to process this week's thing or this unit's thing, I think it works a lot better. And then you're not going, why are we doing discussion?
Well, and one of the things you're doing, though, is you're giving the students more authority for the generation of knowledge in the class, right? I mean, because you're saying, here's the material, where do you want to go? You know, take us places. And so the more open the question or the non-question, right, the more they get to generate knowledge, right? Like I have noticed in my English 100, a strategy that really works when we've done some reading is I impress upon them all that they need to have underlined some or highlighted some passages in the reading. And we start off class, they get in groups of 3, and each person shares one passage that they just thought was interesting. They don't have to have it, you know, for whatever reason. You liked it, you didn't like it, it was style, whatever. And they get going and they just start, because everyone shares something to get started. And then each group, I say, pick the one you like the best or you thought was the most, and we'll share that with the whole class. And I'm out of control, right? Because that discussion may not go where I thought it was going to go, but to me, it's going to go someplace interesting, and I can always work my crap in somewhere. I like you're saying, right? You can when you respond or pull or weave it together, also add your own 2 cents, right?
Right.
So I think that, and again, I keep reading this in the material, this idea of the question of discussion is a question of authority in the classroom. And the role in terms of generating material and knowledge. And it sounds like there's a middle space coming here where we're not totally opening it up, but we're also not prescribing it too narrowly, and that seems to create some good energy.
Yeah. Well, and I think. Sorry, Lisa.
Go ahead, Chris.
I was going to say, the one thing that always gives me confidence in those circumstances, because you're right, if you give away that authority, you can't know where that discussion is going to go. But the one thing that I'm always confident about is that at one point I can just pause, take a step back, and draw attention to how we're coming up with ideas and how that relates to the thinking that's within my discipline, like how someone in my discipline would process the kinds of ideas and texts and things that we are processing. So and depending on how we document that, right? If it's things on a whiteboard or if it's just words that are out in the air, I can always say, do you remember what Zach said? That is what, that's sounding very thesis-like. And so, but that can't stand alone. This other thing over here, that Susie said, this is what we need to, or whatever it is, right? Or this is sounding like a great brainstorm to me. And I'm hearing a couple topics being tossed around and one that we can choose or whatever it is, right? So even if we're talking about nothing related to the actual question I asked, I can always draw attention to the fact that, this is the messy part of what we do when we're trying to aim towards the thing we're aiming towards. And we need to appreciate that. And then we need to kind of, build on that and take advantage of this and figure out how to be confident about this on our own, right? When we're working individually. Because the other cool thing about discussion that I love is students will come in at the beginning and they'll be like, yeah, I got some ideas. I think I understood this text. And then by the end, it's always, man, this is awesome. Like I hadn't thought of it that way. Or, and so just that fact, it's how, so yeah, that is indelible with discussion, right? That's human beings bouncing around ideas. That's that dialogue, right? But how can you adopt that? Like, what are the processes there that you can benefit from on your own when I'm not making you do that? Like, who are the people in your life or on whatever it is, right? So anyway, however derailed the discussion gets, the processes of my discipline, I think, are what can be valued in that moment and sort of taken from that discussion.
And that speaks perfectly to doing this in like science classrooms and math classrooms and classrooms where the information seems to just be information that it's very, very factual. But by focusing on how you engage whatever the material is in your discipline, how do scientists do this? How do biologists look at this? How do mathematicians see this? We're really giving something to students, I think, when we do that, especially at community college where many of them, they don't know what major, teaching them how we think in all these different disciplines, I think is crucial, and letting them play with it is just cool.
Yeah. And theoretically, our outcomes are supposed to push us to do that, right? That's the theory of outcomes, is they're supposed to focus on skills rather than content. But sometimes I feel a little trapped in my outcomes because my outcomes may be focused on 3 different skills and none of them are my real agenda.
Oh yeah, no, we really struggle to get the broadest view of what historians do when we created those outcomes. And when I feel trapped, it's never by the outcomes. It's usually my questions. Yeah. When I try to do questions as a basis of starting discussion, I get trapped in the question. The question I wrote for this unit last semester is not the right question for this group of students.
Right.
And they answer it and they're done, and I'm standing there going, okay, that totally didn't work. Yeah. In fact, my questions for primary sources are actually written in my book. And it's like, sometimes I just want to just get a Sharpie and go, okay, never mind. Just don't even look at that question, okay?
Pay no attention to those.
Pay no attention to the question I thought I wanted last semester. do something completely different. And so Curry's idea of opening it in that kind of way is just, and your idea of just, pick something, just choose something. I seem to be more worried about doing that in a classroom than I am online.
Oh, that's interesting.
Because in the classroom, I tend to give them the question.
Yeah.
And now I'm seeing that's a really bad idea, because then how can I teach them how historians think if I've essentially framed it for them already?
Right.
So Matt is saying he teaches math, and was going to say classroom discussions are important because sometimes students can bring out each other's perspectives, which an instructor can't always do during lecture. Yeah, exactly. I think math is crucial for that, because people get blocks in math, right, Matt? And they need to get through that, and talking about it and providing their perspective on how to approach the subject, I think, is really crucial.
And Matt's language also opens up why discussion is often emphasized in equity pedagogy. Right? How do we create a place where people coming from different perspectives, whether it be a cultural one, whether it be LGBTQIA, how do we create space for people who come in with different lenses to feel that they can participate, and we actually engage those ideas, and those perspectives.
Right.
And he's saying it's a great way of checking in, that's kind of what I meant, where when you lecture in a room and you can see kind of what's going on, but a lot of times you really can't. And if you are having some kind of discussion, even if, especially in a big group, if one person doesn't get something and is willing to say so, or if somebody gets it wrong and you've created a comfortable enough environment that that's totally okay, there will be multiple people who benefit from that, and you won't even know it.
Totally. And I think in that regard, discussion really does have that benefit of the self-assessment, right? The assessment of how things are going and what's working and what's not. But I also think Matt's point also speaks to what Jim's saying, and I just want to push that a little farther, that a student voicing something from their own perspective with their own language gives another student the step they needed that I can't supply, because that gives them language that they're closer to build the thing that I'm trying to describe, and I'm failing to do so. You know what I mean? And so it's that discourse, right? It's that discourse of the classroom where we collaborate together to describe the thing I'm up in front thinking I'm saying clearly, but clearly not saying.
So could you guys translate this into teen speak, please?
Or whatever it is, right? Yeah.
Well, it's an interesting idea. I've been thinking more and more lately about how when, I remember in my younger days as a teacher, when students didn't understand something I had just said that was so brilliant, I'd be a little offended, like, what do you mean? It was amazing. And now I'm sort of like, if you don't understand what I'm saying, I probably screwed it up. Tell me that, I'll try again. And we'll just keep trying till I find a way that connects to you. Let's have a conversation about what I'm saying that doesn't work. And I think when this gets me at something I want to make sure we talk about tonight, which is instructor presence in discussion, both on-site and online. I'm reading a lot about the importance of an instructor moving around a room in an on-site setting and listening. And I have had so many times, because I get so excited, a group will be having a cool discussion, and I'll jump in and say something, and there's stony silence. Like I've ruined the discussion.
I know.
That was so amazing. So it's like, oh God, that's an amazing idea, blah, blah, blah. And then silence, discussion. So I've been seeing in the stuff I'm reading, and I had also noticed in my practice over the last 4 or 5 years that when I can discipline myself to listen more and hold off on responding, and maybe like now I even walk around the clipboard and take notes, and then pull the group together and highlight 1 or 2 things collectively rather than intervening with individual groups. That seems to work better for me, although certainly there's times where you have to intervene, right?
Yeah, and I would say that's the value of the whiteboard for me, is because I get to write down what the student is saying, and I have that feeling like I am totally participating, but it also holds me back. Because my other inclination is just to repeat back what the student said, because I'm super excited about it. And when I do that, I'm using my language and I'm going way too fast trying to connect it to an outcome. And they have the sort of simultaneous feeling of, thanks for stealing my idea and saying it in a way that's way more confusing than the way I just did, right?
Thanks for rephrasing my observation for Jacques Derrida.
Yeah. Yeah. I just want to, just because you made me think of this, and I just want to throw it in there. It's just an instructor presence and how to kind of facilitate discussion as a listener. I think I started doing this totally on accident, but I became aware of it, and now I always do it on purpose. A student that's speaking on the left side of the room, I migrate to the right.
Yes.
I put students between me and the student speaking.
Absolutely.
And the second someone next to me starts talking, I move to the other side of the room. So they're always projecting over each other. And I have nothing that I just want, exactly. Like I just want that everybody inside the conversation, right? I think that's the best way that I'm thinking about it.
So we're literally saying in the physical space where we are and how we're moving. And there's certainly no version which is you sorting folders or going through drafts on the desk while they're discussing that works, right?
Right.
But I've caught myself in that, right? You walk in the room late, you've got a stack of papers, you've graded them, but you didn't write down all the grades. So you get them talking and you're writing down the grades in the front of the room and looking at you.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
These are the realities. I mean, it gets at how carefully prepared we need to be, right? To walk into a room and really effectively facilitate discussion.
Well, one of the things, I don't know the extent to which this works always, but I try to focus on modeling. I know what Curry's saying about we don't want to be rephrasing what they say in scholarly language because it makes it sound like, oh, what you said was fine, but not fine enough. I mean,
now I'll say it the right way.
Right, let me tell you how real professionals say that. So we don't want to do that. But at the same time, I want to model the thinking through and the going the wrong way. A lot of times I'll say something even when they're just telling us what their homework was, and I'll say something and then I'll go sideways with it and say, did that go too far?
Yeah.
Does that not work? Because I want them to see how the thinking processes go and how they can go awry and how that's okay.
Yeah.
So I do want to do some modeling of that, of thinking things through and coming to a conclusion that really doesn't quite make it, or coming to a conclusion I'm happy about. They'll be thrilled to tell you that they always know when I've come to a conclusion that I think I've got it.
So then there's that question of engagement in a face-to-face or a on-site. What about engagement online? What are kind of some of the strategies we're thinking about or playing with for our role in an online discussion? And we can think asynchronous and synchronous, right? Because we've got the two dynamics now.
Yeah.
I'll very speak to synchronous because I haven't really, I'm not that brave yet.
Well, yeah. Go ahead, Lisa. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say for asynchronous, this method I mentioned earlier where I put forth a prompt, I do not enter the discussion again until my post. And then I only occasionally, if something's really weird or somebody seems to really be bringing up something new, occasionally I'll put cool point or something, but I try not to be part of their discussion. But my weekly post always coming at a predictable time. They know I'm reading, they know I'm watching, they know I'm seeing. And then when I take it a certain direction, I'll let them go, and I will rarely interfere after that point either. So that's kind of been the way I've balanced sort of instructor presence with not dominating the asynchronous. But Curry knows more about synchronous.
No, that's really interesting. It's almost the inverse, right? It is do some folder sorting and some grading papers while they're having a discussion online, right? Just stay away. And I totally agree with that. And we had a discussion this last week in my online class over the course of a week, so an asynchronous discussion. And it was fake news was the topic, and they had to pick some stuff. And two people posted in a way that I knew was going to generate there was a potential, like it was very controversial what they had posted. And I knew the potential for the response to get pretty trolly, right? And so I didn't get into the discussion. I did an email, and I just said really cool things, and I pointed to the funny stuff, I pointed to the interesting stuff, and then I pointed to the controversial stuff. And then I tried to just reframe it, like, our goals this week are not to persuade each other of our political ideologies. Our goals this week is to dig into what makes something fake and what makes something journalism, right? And kind of sort of just to do that, just a little like, I'm going to head off what I think might happen, and you know, but I didn't want to get in. I didn't want to get into the discussion because you dominated online in asynchronous discussions. I think that's really interesting.
It is. I just want to throw in one more thing about asynchronous, and then Curry, maybe you can take us to synchronous. Bye, Curry. So the turnaround.
I've been turning around and been kind of rude, but this is why. This is why I've been a jerk.
Oh, that's awesome.
This is now tearing apart my office.
Yeah, hello.
I'm sorry about that.
Oh, it's awesome. What are you talking
Go
about?
ahead.
So the only idea I wanted to share about asynchronous that was on my mind tonight is I have found my asynchronous interactions between students gets better when I focus on the word connection. When I say, find a post and make a connection between something your classmate says and something else we've talked about this semester. And it may be that broad. I may say connect to anything we've done, or I may give them a frame, right? I may say connect to one of these, early 19th century authors or whatever, but leaving it open and talking about connecting ideas more than responding or evaluating.
Or discuss.
What was that?
Or discuss.
Yeah. Yeah. So maybe it is. The moral is connect versus discuss, right?
Yeah. That's awesome.
So Curry, we're kind of running out of time because I think are we supposed to do a 50-minute block, Lisa? Is that the way?
Supposed to. Now you're in charge of PDP, but that's been the rule.
Okay. So those of you who want to claim an hour can turn off your thing.
Right, exactly.
But we're going to talk a little more than that, and it's up to you whether you want to stay. You got your hour at 7:50, but we might talk longer. Okay, Curry, go ahead.
So I already kind of described the things that I've stolen from Jim, and I think that's a big part of my presence in sort of strategy, I'd say, in synchronous discussion is try to tee everybody up to have something to say with confidence and start that way. That way it's immediately a collaborative space. But I really feel like the purpose of a synchronous discussion, at least let me say it this way. The reason a student the reason a student would show up to a synchronous discussion is because there's a clear need to do so. And not a need like I've imposed the need, but there's an intrinsic value there that the student wants to take an hour out of their week or an hour and a half, whatever it is, to show up online. And so it'll be like right before we turn in the very first essay and everybody's worried about what they're supposed to do. Or it's right before I assign the big research project and the research project seems like a beast and there's no way to tackle it, right? And so what I'm doing in synchronous discussions is more making connections myself. I'm saying all the things we did the last 2 weeks, check out this thing and see how easy the paper is going to be now. Like, I mean, that's kind of my point. Or the questions you have about the prompt, let's talk about those things, right? And so it's almost all them doing stuff. It's a warm-up discussion, so our voices are in there, and then it's some quick like clarification of steps to get from where we were to where we need to be. And then it's like a half hour of collaborations in a Google Doc, right? Where they're just typing stuff and reading stuff that their peers have created. And really at that point, my presence gets in the way because it's a half hour of them typing and me sort of saying, how's everything going? I hope you're having fun. And then they type in the chat, please be quiet, I'm trying to concentrate.
Is that the online equivalent of walking around the room and jumping into their discussion in their group and saying, so how's it going? It's like, excuse me, we were in the middle of a thought here.
Yeah,
totally. I'm here to help.
I think this is a fascinating paradox because here we are near the end of our session, and Matt asked a good question I'm going to ask you to respond to, but here we are near the end of the session, and what are we talking about? Discussion as writing on a Google Doc. So we've moved from the idea of discussion as oral, verbal interactions to discussion being a live, written interaction on a Google Doc.
Totally.
I've got my own animal here.
Nice.
given another hour, I bet we get into all sorts of interaction, not only with students and each other, but our ideas about interaction with material and all sorts of things. Because once you get into what we're trying to do is actually engage students in the work.
Yeah.
And that's really, yes, we want to engage them with each other, but not just to have coffee.
Yeah.
We want to engage them in the work.
Yeah.
And there's so many ways to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to, before we go, Matt asked a question about, and I think probably other people who watch this later will too. How do you do that? What are the technical moves someone who wants to do synchronous online work needs to do, Curry? Can you just walk people through how you use Zoom and Google Docs?
Yeah. So there is some setting up stuff. So those steps include the week before, just linking students to Zoom so that they can download the web client. There's a video like this is what it'll be like when you log in, so some orientation stuff. I have them all RSVP, so who's going to show up, who needs to take the alternate assignment, and I always frame that as, I just need to know how to prepare. Right? People are going to be in groups on asynchronous and asynchronous, so I just need to know who. And then the last step is I tell them whatever device you're going to use, log into Google Docs with it before we get to the meeting. Because the problem always happens that right in the middle of the synchronous moving, when we move to Google Docs, I'll send out that link, and then like 5 people, it doesn't work for them. Okay.
Or so you put it in the chat. Or you put it in the chat, and the link in the chat doesn't work for them, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's right. And sometimes even though students will test their device beforehand, it still doesn't work in the chat. So I just have my email open and I'll email those students. So that's the setting up stuff. I think those 3 things are important. Zoom itself probably takes, what do you think, Jim? Like an hour maybe to watch some tutorial videos and know how to.
Yeah, I would say if you've never done synchronous before, you can learn Zoom in about an hour. If you've done synchronous with another tool, it takes about 45 seconds to learn Zoom.
Yeah, that's right.
Because Zoom is so much more intuitive, I think.
Yeah, that's right.
Than something like what we used to CCC Confer, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and they now went to this too because it was right. So they're now using Zoom, and then, but even if you use like Google Hangouts or you use Facebook. The communication there, or you use Skype. This is so very similar.
Right.
Yeah.
One of the cool things. Let me just throw something in and you can finish. One of the cool things that's also happening in Zoom, and I haven't yet tried to use it in our version, but it's now being set up where you can organize students into groups inside Zoom live. And I haven't played with that yet. Have you played with that yet, Curry?
No.
I think that's the next move.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure actually our account has that option yet. But I know as I was reading on the web and in other places, there are people doing a lot of Zoom for group work. We have a colleague on campus who actually has the students meet separately in their Zoom accounts, record their meeting, and post it to a discussion board.
That's awesome.
I think that's really interesting.
Yeah.
So I would say, Matt, there's a lot of ways to do this. I think Curry's is a simple, successful way to get started. So go ahead, Curry. What else did you want to say?
No, I was just basically what you just described, that there is after the meeting's done, there's a step, and it's posting, right? And so if it's you send your students to a group thing on their own, you want to have that documented. And I think that's really the value of the synchronous discussion online for the whole class is, the benefit of being able to interact with it later, either as a participant who was there or as someone who didn't get to participate. It's just all there, right? I mean, it's the whole class session is just right there. Yeah. And what is cool about these webinar sort of clients is they're multimodal, right? And especially if you bring Google Docs into them. So you have the oral processing, you have the typing, you have everything, right? And so all of that becomes materials you can use to then just move to the next thing.
And a student can be outside their job in the parking lot by Target doing it on their phone.
Yeah.
That's what makes Zoom so cool. And CCC Confer said it could do that, but it never really worked that way. But Zoom, it really works. I mean, I've got some funny images of students working from their phone.
You get a lot of this.
Yeah. Or just suddenly swirling,
Right. Yeah, totally.
I'm totally fine with that, right?
Yeah.
So, Curry, one last logistics question, and then I think maybe we could go around our group and share a closing thought. But you do a great job of getting a lot of students to attend. You were telling me last time you had almost 20 people, right? So
Yeah.
let me just ask you quickly, what times are you doing these? Because I think your timing is good.
Yeah, I do it right when we're doing this. I do it from 7 o'clock to 8:30, or 7 o'clock to 8. And I think that's, and you know, I think it works because it's, for some of us, it's at dinner time. For some of us, it's a little before. But I tell my students, like, you know, and that's the other logistic I forgot to say is the mute button. Because I tell my students, your kids can be in the background. You could be helping out. You could be doing what you need. Dogs, obviously, dogs can be part of it.
Right.
That doesn't matter. Just get yourself into a space where you can listen and participate. You know, that's it. And so I think that really, and like you're saying, like getting off work, sitting in the car, like it just, that 7 to 8 seems to be a sweet spot for most. And I usually do it on a Tuesday, but I haven't experimented with other days of the week.
But Tuesday works.
Yeah, Tuesday for me works. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're really close to an hour, even by any chronological measure. So Lisa, do you want to offer a few closing thoughts?
Yeah, I think I'm going to kind of close with that alignment idea, that sort of bringing it all together, that somehow discussion should work to bring everything together that you're trying to do in terms of the content and examination. And I really like what you said, Jim, about having them go off in all these different directions that often are not what you really had planned at all, but cause them to think like somebody who works in your discipline. And that it makes it, they have to kind of do the work to have the conversation.
Yeah.
That's what we all want to do. And so I think of it as alignment. There's probably some, you would know the cool theoretical terms for things like this, but somehow putting things in a package and making discussion a valuable part of that package instead of doing discussion kind of as a side dish.
Yeah.
You know, I think is really important.
So it's, you know, you're talking about having a sense of purpose too.
An objective or something, but not so much a direct objective for what you want out of the discussion, but more of a larger objective of what you want out of the unit. For lack of a better.
Discussion is a kind of a mode in the course.
Right. It's a way of covering. I don't like that word, but it's a way of engaging the material. It's not just chat.
I like that word aligning, and I like it better than the theory word, which would probably be scaffolding. Because I think scaffolding has a rigidity about it, right? You're doing this, and this, and aligning allows for some more freedom of movement, right? It doesn't all have to work in a linear manner. It can,
right. Well, and the scaffolding
you're just moving in a direction.
Right, whereas scaffolding seems to suggest a particular direction in your building. Like, I think of scaffolding as kind of like building blocks. First,
literally, right? The scaffolding of a building, Right,
and whereas you have these discussions where, like Curry mentioned, it's you just talk about something interesting about or one thing that we've presented to them that's loose and open.
Yeah,
that doesn't strike me as really scaffolding.
Right, it doesn't.
It is.
Aligning's a better word. I like that. That's cool. Yeah. All right, we're going to give Curry the last word. Curry, you are the last hurrah.
Okay.
What final words of genius do you wish to leave us with?
Oh, if it's going to be genius, then I'm gonna echo Tony Berman. And I remember him observing a class of mine one time where it was all discussion. And one of the things he left me with in our sort of chat afterwards was not allowing what we do in the classroom to remain at a coffee shop conversation. And sort of these coffee shop discussions where we feel like we're solving all the world's problems and we dive into some fascinating stuff and then we leave and then we get more coffee the next day. And so it's exactly what Lisa's saying. It's align that really cool investigative experience with something, whether that's a reflective assignment at the end or an outline for a paper or a way to think about an article you want them to read that weekend. It's that cool experience aligned with a thing, right? And don't let it just be a cool coffee shop conversation that stays in that space, right? Something we take with us. And that's totally Tony Berman.
I think that's a great note to end on, and we're almost exactly on time. I want to thank Matt and Curry and Lisa for being here, and we will make this recording available to folks who want to participate in the discussion later and accumulate flex hours later off the schedule. So thanks for getting our conversation series off to a great start, everybody.
Cool. Thank you, Jim.
Night.
Good night.